You are listening to Thick Thighs and Murder Vibes, a true crime podcast. Join us as we uncover untold pieces of the puzzle to give you all the dark and juicy details.
Each episode will take you down the rabbit hole as we dive deep into real-life murders, unsolved mysteries, and sinister crimes. This podcast does contain explicit content and graphic descriptions. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Welcome back, accomplices. My voice is sounding much better this week. As we said last week, being sick gave us a killer idea for this week's episode.
The cases we will be presenting today are a result of Munchausen's by proxy, but we also wanted to give you a look into a story of a woman who suffers from Munchausen syndrome.
This is the story of Kelly Ronahan, a story that has captured the attention of many people across the globe. As Kelly's health deteriorated, her story became a hot topic on social media. Some accused her of fabricating her illness to gain attention. The wild roller coaster of her medical journey left many people scratching their heads, wondering if Kelly was genuinely sick or if there was something more sinister at play. And what we are all wanting to know is the truth behind Kelly Ronahan's mysterious medical condition. Is it a case of Munchausen syndrome, where a person fakes or exaggerates their symptoms to gain attention, sympathy, or both? Or could it be a misdiagnosis, with doctors failing to pinpoint the cause of her numerous ailments accurately?
If you have followed Kelly's story, you already know that she was born in Kelowna, Canada, and had a zest for life from the start. She shared this passion with her twin sister Gina, who accompanied her on many of her life's adventures. With a strong sense of determination, Kelly attended Okanagan College, where she honed her skills and knowledge. As a talented ballet dancer and instructor, she gracefully twirled her way into the hearts of many, leaving a lasting impression on those she encountered. Kelly's life took a dramatic turn in 2014 when she began battling a mysterious blood disease. This unknown illness left her and her medical team baffled, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle of her rapidly declining health. To manage this perplexing condition, Kelly required weekly blood transfusions, which, in her words, saved her life every 2 weeks. Despite this lifeline, her health continued to deteriorate. Between 2014 and 2016, Kelly's hemoglobin count took a nosedive, leaving doctors scratching their heads. At various points, she attributed her condition to multiple sclerosis and uterine fibroids, though there wasn't much evidence. By March 2016, she had received a whopping 95 liters of blood from over 55 generous donors. Kelly's health saga continued when she was admitted to the hospital for seizures in July of 2016. However, she was discharged after doctors discovered that she wasn't being entirely truthful about her condition. Despite these revelations, she continued to receive blood transfusions and tons of support from her followers.
The following year saw Kelly grappling with an inflamed port and sepsis, adding another layer of complexity to her medical mystery. During this time, she also admitted to struggling with exercise obsession and eating disorders. Kelly even made allegations of self-harm, though the photos she shared raised some eyebrows. In 2018, Kelly's health took another turn with swelling on her feet and the sudden appearance of blisters. Rumors of Munchausen syndrome began to circulate, casting doubt on the authenticity of her claims. Amidst seizures, circulation issues, and nerve damage, Kelly fought to keep her spirits up. Eventually, she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and underwent skin grafts in hopes of a better future. But sadly, in May of 2021, Kelly underwent a leg amputation as a last resort to save her life. Following this ordeal, her social media presence dwindled, reflecting the immense toll her journey had taken on her. Undeterred, Kelly revealed plans to get prosthetics, leaving her followers eagerly awaiting updates on her progress. Throughout her ordeal, Kelly received an outpouring of love and support from people who followed her story. Many were moved by her resilience and determination in the face of adversity, rallying behind her every step of the way. However, not everyone was convinced. Accusations of Munchausen syndrome began to surface, with some suggesting that Kelly was faking her illness to garner attention and sympathy. One particularly bizarre rumor even alleged that she had injected feces into her leg in a desperate bid to induce sepsis. Yikes. Who would do that?
Gross.
Oh, good old poo leg.
Poo leg.
Oh, nasty.
These accusations, coupled with the immense physical and emotional toll of her journey, weighed heavily on Kelly's mental health. As her condition worsened, so too did the strain on her psyche, painting a heartbreaking picture of a woman caught between hope and despair. Kelly Ronahan's story remains an enigma, shrouded in mystery and controversy. Her journey, marked by a series of seemingly inexplicable ailments and numerous hospitalizations, has captivated and confounded both supporters and skeptics alike. The crux of the debate surrounding Kelly's case lies in the question of Munchausen syndrome versus misdiagnosis.
Although we did slightly touch base on what Munchausen syndrome is, we have some additional facts about Munchausen's and Munchausen's by proxy.
Also known as factitious disorder imposed on another, Munchausen by proxy is a condition in which a caregiver creates the appearance of health problems in another person, typically their own child. This may include injuring the proxy or altering test samples. The caregiver then presents the proxy as being sick or injured. Permanent injury or death of the proxy may occur as a result of the disorder. Although the caregiver typically does not benefit from their own behavior, there are notable cases where the caregiver defrauds charities, insurance companies, or local friends and family under the guise of using this for the aid of the proxy. Narcissistic personality disorder can be linked to Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but with the difference that people with MSBP cause physical illness in others, and people with NPD cause mental illness in others. The similarity is in the intentional harming of a vulnerable other to meet their own needs.
Munchausen syndrome was first introduced in 1951 by British doctor Richard Asher after observing patients who invented or exaggerated medical illnesses and symptoms, going as far as to have doctors perform unnecessary procedures and engage in self-harm to garner attention and sympathy. Yet, it wasn't until more than 20 years later that Munchausen's by proxy was discussed. In a 1976 paper by John Money and June Faith Warlass, their initial research was expanded upon by British pediatrician Roy Meadow, who in 1977 described one case of a mother who poisoned her toddler with salt and another who added her own blood to her baby's urine sample. So, what is the difference between Munchausen's and hypochondria? Munchausen syndrome is a rare psychological and behavioral condition in which somebody fabricates or induces symptoms of illness in themselves. People with Munchausen syndrome typically display a set pattern of behavior, and this pattern includes lying about their symptoms and typically also lying about other aspects of their life, such as their past or level of education, manipulating test results to suggest the presence of symptoms, such as adding blood to urine samples, actually inflicting symptoms on themselves, such as poisoning themselves with an overdose of medication, and traveling from hospital to hospital or doctor to doctor and seeing many different physicians. Whereas people who have hypochondria actually believe they are ill, but do not manipulate test results. People who exaggerate or pretend to be ill to gain some sort of benefit, such as avoiding military duty or trying to obtain compensation. People with Munchausen syndrome know they're making their symptoms up and can be highly manipulative, but their behavior brings them no obvious benefit. Instead, they often undergo painful and sometimes life-threatening surgeries, even though they know it's unnecessary.
So how common is Munchausen syndrome? It is hard to estimate how many people are affected by Munchausen syndrome. They tend to be highly secretive and often use a number of false identities. Once their deception is uncovered, they discharge themselves from hospital and move to another area. The condition is thought to be most common in white men aged between 30 and 50. It is unclear why this is the case.
Yeah, I would think it would be women.
Yeah.
Because we're smarter.
The causes of Munchausen syndrome are largely unknown. Most people who have been diagnosed with the condition refuse to accept any sort of psychiatric treatment, so little is known about their motives or thought processes.
As we stated, most people with Munchausen syndrome refuse to cooperate with any sort of psychiatric treatment or psychological profiling. There is little available evidence on the possible causes of the condition. There is a consensus of opinion that Munchausen syndrome is a type of personality disorder. Personality disorders are a class of mental health conditions in which an individual has a distorted pattern of thoughts and beliefs about themselves and others, which lead them to behave in ways most people would regard as disturbed and abnormal. One theory is that people with Munchausen syndrome have an antisocial personality disorder which causes them to take pleasure in manipulating and deceiving doctors. They may see a doctor as a figure of authority, so tricking these figures of authority gives them a sense of power and control. Another theory is that Munchausen syndrome is an attempt to form relationships and become more socially acceptable. Many people with Munchausen syndrome are loners, have little contact with their family, and have few friends. So they then take comfort in adopting the role of a patient and find the doctor-patient relationship provides a much-needed source of human contact and emotional warmth. Many people with Munchausen syndrome have claimed to have experienced physical and sexual abuse during childhood, though, due to their tendency to lie about their past, it is hard to say whether it is actually true in all cases. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know all of that about Munchausen's. Like, I never understood what would make somebody want to fake illnesses.
Yeah.
Before. I mean, obviously the attention factor for sure, but that's interesting.
So I am presenting first this week. I have a couple cases for you guys, so let's jump into it.
I'm so excited you're going first this week.
Jennifer Bush lived at home with her parents, Craig and Kathy Bush, and her two older brothers in Coral Springs, Florida. By the time Jennifer was 8 years old, she had been in and out of hospital stays over 200 times, undergoing 40 unnecessary operations.
Oh, that poor girl.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
She had been treated for a long list of illnesses and has scars from dozens of surgeries on her chest. After struggling to find a cause for her illnesses, doctors finally diagnosed Jennifer with neurogenic gastrointestinal pseudo-obstruction, which means her stomach doesn't digest food, preventing her from absorbing food properly. She had seizures and was plagued with infections because her immune system didn't function properly. Doctors had removed her gallbladder, her appendix, and part of her intestines. She was often nourished through feeding tubes. Faced with mounting medical bills, Kathy started lobbying for healthcare reform and would often speak publicly and in publications about her family's battle to take care of Jennifer. Kathy even visited the White House to raise awareness of the issue, where Jennifer got to meet Hillary Clinton. Florida officials had first become suspicious that something was going on in 1991, but didn't think that they had enough proof until 1995, when they received a report from a nurse who suspected that Kathy may have been intentionally making Jennifer sick by giving her extra doses of medicine and tampering with Jennifer's feeding machine. Police and child welfare authorities launched an investigation, and after a year amounted enough evidence to arrest Kathy on child abuse charges, alleging that she had deliberately made her young daughter ill. On April 15th, 1996, Jennifer, who was now 9, was removed from her home, away from her parents and brothers. She was transferred to a hospital in Cincinnati, where she was placed in foster care.
Did they take her brothers too?
Not that I could tell.
That seems odd, but...
Yeah, because you'd think if it was bad enough to remove one child, they would remove all of them.
Yeah.
At the time, prosecutors said Jennifer was the victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a syndrome that had grown in notoriety at the time of the arrest. Kathy was found guilty of aggravated child abuse and fraud in 1999 and sentenced to 5 years, which she only spent about 3 years in state prison. Jennifer was not allowed to see her mother until she had left foster care, at which point she would be an adult. Kathy Bush claims she is innocent. She says, quote, "There's not one thread of solid proof that I've done anything to Jennifer. We feel as though we have made the ultimate sacrifices for Jennifer, and then to be ridiculed and accused of such a heinous crime, it's unbearable, absolutely unbearable," end quote. Some doctors defended Kathy Bush, saying that she was not abusing her child. One of those doctors being one that had treated Jennifer for 5 years. "I think the woman is extremely dangerous to her daughter," a psychiatrist told a judge during a hearing about the case. "There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that most of this child's illnesses were fabricated." Against the odds, the mother and daughter were able to repair their relationship, and they now live close to each other in Georgia. Jennifer has given a few interviews as an adult and has made it very clear that she thinks her mother never abused her.
So she got Stockholm Syndrome too? Or...
She says, "Today, I can proudly say my family is extremely close-knit. The bond I had with my brothers prior to being removed from my family is something that never changed. My relationship with them helped carry me through my years in foster care. My parents and I have picked up from where we left off and have a very close and loving relationship. The 10 years I spent in foster care were traumatic, and I had some devastating things happen to me. However, I persevered because of all of the angels that were there for me during these difficult times. These people helped shape the woman I have become today.
I wish you guys could see how fucking hard I just rolled my eyes, like all the way to the back of my head. No joke. Oh. I don't mean to victim shame, but some fucking people, I just don't understand it.
She has said that her traumatic experience in foster care made her decide to become a social worker.
No. You got one, Coco.
And then for Gretchen first. I'm going to end it with a quote from Jennifer. She says, "Today, I am living my dream as a social worker and changing the lives of the children and families I am working with. I am married to my high school sweetheart who has walked alongside me for the past 10 years. I get a lot of joy making memories with my family and making a difference in my community."
I love that for her. Did she still have the issues when she was in foster care? The medical issues? Or did they go away?
I think she has the gastrointestinal problems.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was caused from her mother bringing that on or not, but she still lives with that, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
They just were thinking that her mother was messing with the medications and stuff when she was feeding her through her G-tube.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just curious about that because when her mom mentioned in court that there was no evidence against her, my first thought was, well, if when she was taken out of your care and put in foster care, if all of that stopped, she didn't have any of these conditions anymore, right there is your evidence. Like you were causing that.
Right.
So thank you for clearing that up for me.
You're welcome. That's actually a good point. That brings me perfectly into the next case that I will be presenting today.
I love when I set them up like that.
It was a good setup.
Yeah.
In 2014, in Meadville, Missouri, 9-year-old Patrick had been suffering from epilepsy and hydrocephalus, which is a buildup of fluid in the brain, due to a premature birth in 2005. So just to paint the picture, Meadville is about 220 miles northwest of St. Louis and about 102 miles northeast from Kansas City. His mother, Rachel Kinsella, began making frequent and secretive trips to the hospitals with Patrick to get anti-seizure medications. Despite having meds, the boy's health began to decline. He was having hallucinations, seizures, problems walking and breathing. The 9-year-old was flown to St. Louis Children's Hospital after he suffered a seizure at school, resulting in him spending 6 months in the hospital. Despite more than a dozen treatments, tests, and procedures, doctors were unable to diagnose his medical issues. He ended up having more than 10 blood transfusions and 6 surgeries altogether.
Oh, that poor kid.
I would not enjoy seeing my kid going through 10 blood transfusions, 6 surgeries.
Yeah.
During these hospital stays, Patrick would be admitted in very serious condition, one time being almost comatose, according to the doctor during trial, but would get much better while he was there. And then, as soon as he'd return home, he would get sick again. Doctors discovered that the reason why was from a dangerous combination and overdose of 2 prescription drugs, given over the period of about a year. They believe this poisoning took place from March 2014 to February 2015. It had been discovered that Rachel had been simultaneously seeking treatment for Patrick at hospitals in St. Louis and Kansas City, and had filled prescriptions at multiple pharmacies in both areas. And if you remember from just a little bit ago, Meadville wasn't really close to either of those towns. So she was going quite the distance to get this medication.
That's like the distance, like total distance from like us to Seattle.
Yeah, it's pretty similar, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what, like
a 6-hour drive.
Yeah,
so she's driving all over the place.
Yeah, like she was really, really in it.
She was determined.
She was definitely determined. She'd failed to inform doctors in either city that Patrick was receiving additional care. So why didn't the doctors in St. Louis and Kansas City know what medicines each other had prescribed? Well, Missouri is the only state in the U.S. that refuses to create a prescription medicine database. This would allow doctors and pharmacists to see what has been prescribed to you by other doctors and pharmacists, like it is in the rest of the country. Kinsella was accused of poisoning her son with a mix of medications, and in February 2015, Patrick was removed from his mother's care. Rachel was charged with first-degree assault and child endangerment in November of 2015. Kinsella told police she accidentally gave her son the wrong medication on occasion. Whoops!
It was an accident.
My bad.
On occasion.
On occasion.
Which is more than once. Okay. It's just...
no big deal.
Yeah.
Although medical experts say the type and amount of drugs found in the boy's system showed intentional poisoning. Shocker, who saw that coming? She, of course, denied the charges against her. Also shocking. In May 2017, the jury in St. Louis County deliberated for 90 minutes before returning a guilty verdict. She was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Kinsella was ordered to have no contact with her son. The boy is now living with his paternal grandparents and, shockingly, said to be thriving.
What?
What? He thankfully has no lasting effects from the medication issue.
He's lucky.
Yes, he is. Seizure medication is not a joke.
Yeah, no, I know.
So why on earth would this mother do this to her child? It is speculated that it was because Patrick had inherited $275,000 when his father died in 2012, and that money was being managed by the boy's aunt. By making Patrick sick, Kinsella was in position to siphon funds from the inheritance under the pretense that she needed to pay for his medical expenses. And if Patrick were to pass, his mother would be his heir.
So her son's not even worth $275,000 because she had to use some of that money to pay for his medical expenses, which means she didn't inherit that much.
She would get less than that.
Yeah. Well, Mother of the Year for that one.
Mother of the Year.
Even for $275,000, though. Like, you got to be really hard up to kill your own child.
Yeah, luckily she was not successful with the murder attempt.
Well, I guess that means I'm next. So my case this week is the case of Lacey and Garnett Spears. Born and raised in Decatur, Alabama, Lacey Spears spent her early years dreaming of being a mother. In fact, she got a job working as a nanny in a daycare center as soon as she graduated from high school in 2006. Her co-worker there, Kat Woods, described her as the best possible caregiver for the infants at the center, and there is no one you would trust more with your children. The two women were close. So close that they split a foot-long sandwich each day while the babies napped.
Aw, how romantic.
That's friendship.
Why don't we split a foot-long sandwich each day?
Do you want to split a foot-long sandwich?
I would.
Okay.
I would like that very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Now we're true friends.
Yes. You're not friends till you split a foot long.
Split the whole 12 inches.
Well, and I've been lied about what 6 inches is, so, I mean, you could cut it wrong and I'd never know. Moving on. Lacey met Chris Hill in 2008 when they lived in the same apartment complex. Lacey lived down the hall from Chris, and one day she had asked her neighbor for some help setting up a baby's crib, as she would often care for a friend's child and had him overnights and sometimes weekends. Chris states that while he was putting the crib together, Lacey started to ask him personal questions. He chalked it up to her being lonely and just wanting attention, and in the days that followed, that attention became sex, or neighbors with benefits, if you will. The two hooked up for a little while, and the relationship between them lasted a few months until Lacey broke things off. Soon after, she told Chris that she was pregnant, and at first, they talked about marriage and even started to look at baby name books. Then, something happened. Chris says that Lacey changed. She went from wanting to be married to telling him that the baby she was carrying was not his child. This was the first indication of a story brewing and that Lacey had planned to deny him access to their son. Chris states that Lacey threatened to call the police if he didn't keep his distance and that the closest he ever got to his son was a small glimpse of the newborn baby when they walked through the halls.
Oh, it's so fucked up.
I know. So sad. Garnet Paul Thompson Spears weighed 6 pounds, 14 ounces when he was born on December 3rd, 2008 in Huntsville Hospital. The birth announcement in the Decatur Daily newspaper listed no father. Lacey had told friends and the slightest acquaintances that her son's father was a police officer named Blake who died in a car accident. The young mom created a blog that only contains 2 posts and is devoted to the loss of Blake. In one post, she writes, quote, "We have together survived nearly 365 days, a complete year without Blake, my soulmate and Garnet's daddy. The past year has been the hardest of my life," end quote. Now, being me, I did some digging and I found out that Blake is real and an officer who did know Lacey, but they had only gone out on a few dates and nothing ever transpired from it. Blake is still very much alive.
So messed up.
I know. That's creepy.
Yeah.
Like, makes my skin crawl. Garnet was admitted into the hospital just weeks after birth, with doctors noting a failure to thrive. Lacey told friends he was suffering from an acid reflux issue that required surgery when he was just a month old. Still, the child seemed medically fragile and was often in the hospital. Lonely as a single mother and desperate for attention, Lacey often posted on social media about her son's health issues. She was devoted to chronicling her search for a cure for whatever illness plagued Garnet. Most little boys spend their first years on swings or in sandboxes. Garnet Spears spent much of his time in hospitals. To be Garnet the Great, as Lacey Spears called her son in Facebook posts, tweets, and MySpace photos, meant to be hooked up to IV tubes inserted into a tiny foot or arm, held fast with tape featuring blue trucks. "My sweet angel is in the hospital for the 23rd time. Please pray he gets to come home soon," she tweeted weeks before Garnet's first birthday.
23 times and he wasn't even a year old.
Yeah. Ginger Dabbs Anderson, a former nurse at Decatur General Hospital who said she later befriended Lacey so she could help care for Garnet, saw the mother's parenting style inside the hospital and out. Her takeaway, which she shared with investigators, was that Lacey sometimes put her child at risk. Ginger said she and other medical staff grew suspicious of Lacey's claims during repeated visits that the boy couldn't digest food. Lacey would tell the doctors and nurses that Garnet was throwing up everything, and Ginger recalls taking Garnet to the nurse's station to feed and then observe him for 2 hours, which that's how long it takes to digest. During that time, he didn't throw up at all. The nurses showed Lacey how to feed Garnet, telling her to go slowly and to hold him upright, but she wouldn't listen and kept telling different nurses that he was still throwing up because he's doing it wrong.
Also, nurses are mandatory reporters, so if they had suspicions, why did they not tell police?
Well, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad they did that.
Yeah. Ginger also recalls that on one occasion, Lacey came into the hospital when Ginger was not working and appeared to be stressed. She said that she couldn't deal with this stuff and that she didn't know what to do with Garnet because he wouldn't eat and would just cry, so doctors admitted him to the hospital and called Child Protective Services.
Finally.
Doctors stated that they didn't know what CPS would do. They just felt that they needed to be involved and felt comfortable knowing somebody else was watching. During one of dozens of hospital visits, Lacey tried to convince medical staff that Garnet had thrown up by pointing to a wet spot on the hospital sheets that turned out to be water. She kept telling medical staff that the boy wouldn't eat and asked them to surgically implant a feeding tube that would allow her to feed him without him having to swallow. When they declined, saying he ate well under their care and was able to keep food down, Lacey took Garnet to another hospital where doctors implanted the tube known as a G-tube. This tube allowed doctors, nurses, and Lacey to provide the nutrients that the boy's mother claimed he was lacking.
Perfect. And see where this is going.
Ginger says, quote, "She didn't know how to be a mother. That's the only reason I was friends with her, because I thought I could teach her how to mother Garnett, what to do for him, and how to love him and take care of him," end quote. Garnett would spend overnights at the home Ginger shared with her mother, and he would eat with them. When he got older, Ginger would feed him whatever he could chew. This kid ate French fries, mashed potatoes. He loved fried okra. Ginger claims on one occasion that he was so hungry, she went to McDonald's and got him a Happy Meal, and he ate the whole thing. She also says that Lacey had a fit when she saw him eating a Happy Meal, as she was not approving of fast food.
It doesn't sound like she was approving of any food.
No. Several of the emergency room visits went beyond feeding issues. Garnett also seemed prone to ear infections, and at one point had a staph infection in his ear. Autumn Hunt, who entrusted her son Jonathan to Lacey's care, also remembers Lacey frequently bringing Garnett to the hospital with ear infections and digestive problems. She recalls Lacey being upset once when the hospital held Garnett overnight and would not let her stay over. They stated that they wanted to see if Garnett had the same symptoms without Lacey.
Shocker. He probably didn't.
Some in her life described Lacey as a caring and nurturing mother, but Ginger and others saw darker signs. The nurse said she once witnessed Lacey lose her temper by holding her son's head underwater in a bathtub because he was whining while she was washing his hair.
Oh my gosh.
Ginger states that she jumped on Lacey, grabbed Garnett, and briefly took him from the home, but felt that it was just a reaction to being overwhelmed, so she did not notify CPS or the police.
No, that's literally attempted murder, and she didn't even report it.
Yeah, and this is what makes me think that the only reason the kids in your cases survived is because they were taken from the home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, jeez.
There was one incident where Lacey shared that she had lost her cool with where she screamed at him and told him in the bathtub not to touch the faucet. When he did, she wrote, she ran the tub full of cold water with him in it and made him take a freezing bath.
Oh my God.
She then said she felt terrible and asked for forgiveness.
Better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission.
May I give you a freezing bath?
No.
Then you're right. It would be better to just ask for forgiveness. When Garnett was 3 years old, Lacey told friends that she wanted to leave Alabama and announced that she was moving. She took Garnett to Florida to live with her maternal grandmother, and a year later moved to upstate New York, where she would live in the Fellowship community, which was a multi-generational commune whose primary purpose was to care for the elderly residents. Lacey would care for the elderly, and Garnett would grow up living in a close-knit community. At the Fellowship, there was a focus on holistic living and clean eating, which was something Lacey told her friends in Alabama that could only help Garnett's issues.
I wouldn't say holistic living and clean eating is McDonald's motto, but he seemed to eat that just fine.
Yeah. Lacey kept everyone up to date on what was happening in her life via social media. She was meticulous about documenting Garnett's hospitalizations and medical trials as the little boy grew. So apparently that commune's not helping any. Garnett was repeatedly admitted to the emergency room with elevated sodium levels, while Spears continued telling everyone who would listen about her son's challenges with Crohn's and celiac disease, seizures, high fevers, and other conditions, continuing her act as the anguished mom of a child with an unknown illness. The last hospitalization, we went and saw The Little Mermaid today. That wasn't even one of the songs. For those of you listening, we had a girls' day today and went and saw The Little Mermaid. It was good. And now, back to our story. The last hospitalization in January 2014 brought Garnett to Nyack Hospital in New York, where he was described as being very ill, clutching his head, screaming and dry heaving, and having seizures. Lab work showed that his sodium levels were dangerously high. The doctors were puzzled. Could it be a medicine he was on, or was his body unable to process sodium as it should? A friend called Lacey when she saw the Facebook post about the hospitalization. Lacey insisted that doctors just didn't know, but were continuing to run tests. Medications helped to lower the sodium levels in his blood, and doctors were preparing to discharge the boy since he was acting normal again, and clearly on the mend. Lacey even made Facebook posts, and friends were relieved to see photos of Garnett sitting up in his bed looking great, but the happiness was short-lived. Friends and family were horrified when Lacey posted again that Garnett's symptoms had returned before they could be discharged, and this time they were worse. He had declined rapidly, and doctors made the decision to airlift him to Westchester and was admitted to the Children's Hospital intensive care unit and put under the Westchester's physician's care. Shortly after Lacey and Garnett arrived at the Children's Hospital, a doctor intercepted her when she was trying to enter Garnett's room and blocked her access. Good. He told her it was metabolically impossible for the body of a 5-year-old to produce such high sodium levels, and declared that something was going on there. Sources say Lacey continued to sleep in Garnett's room and had unmonitored access to him in the room's attached bathroom. The next day, when some friends had visited, Garnett was alert and talking. One friend recalled the 5-year-old pleading for her not to leave him. The following morning, Garnett's condition worsened and he coded. Lacey began posting numerous updates and online pictures of her son, including photos of him on life support, urging her supporters not to give up. Which, I don't have children, but I can tell you this much. If I did, or even if, like, let's say your kids were in the hospital and I was there, the last thing I'm thinking about is
to post it on social media. To post
a picture of them, let alone even take a picture. Yeah. Why would you want that?
Yeah. I would not want that image to stay in my memory at all. I would not want a picture of that.
Ugh, that's like, there was a girl we went to school with whose sister had passed away, and this other girl that we went to school with took pictures of her in her casket at her funeral and posted them on Facebook. I was horrified.
What the fuck? Wait, side note, I was there for that funeral. That was literally my first time ever seeing a dead body.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
All the funerals that I had been to before were all closed caskets or cremations. And that was the first open casket that I'd ever been to. So it was the first dead.
Oh, wow.
And all I could think of was, like, she had a young fucking daughter, and that daughter fucking lost her shit when she saw her mom in there. Like, why would you do that to a child?
Yeah.
Like, I get having her there so she can go through the fucking, like, grieving process, but at the same time, do a different service for her or something. Like,
yeah,
I would not want my young child to see my dead body in a fucking casket.
Yeah.
How fucking traumatic.
No, I totally get it. I don't know what it would be like to obviously be that young and see your mom or a parent in a casket, like somebody that you're close to. But I can tell you that when I was 8, my mom's mom, so my grandma Kitty, passed away. We obviously went to like the viewing of the body. I wasn't close because my mom's from California, but that's where her mom was in California. And so I remember my grandma coming up when I was like 3 for Christmas one year. She stayed with us for a couple weeks, I believe. But 1, I was 3. 2, both my mom's parents were deaf, so I could never talk to her or anything.
Yeah.
So I didn't really remember her, but seeing her in the casket, it's funny because my family always makes fun of this story because I kept touching her. And
in your brain, you probably processed it as she's just sleeping.
Yeah. And I don't know why I kept touching her, but I kept touching her. I almost knocked her casket over.
Oh, God.
And, like, the creepiest thing about it was, like, I felt like when I would put my hand on her hand, like, she would smile at me. But
sad.
It was, yeah. But, yeah, it was still kind of, like, traumatizing, I guess.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I was 8, and I know that her daughter was younger than that. But, yeah, all right. Sorry about that tangent, guys. So, back to the story. While Garnett was on life support at the new hospital, a doctor came in to declare him brain dead. Then the final blow came. Garnett had died. Initially, Spears was flooded with condolences. However, the support soon diminished as friends learned about the investigation and stories from her past. how her frequent emergency room visits raised eyebrows among medical staff, that she misrepresented herself as the mother of a child that she babysat, and that she had lied about Garnett's father. He was not a police officer who died in a crash, but instead was a garage door installer still living in Alabama. One of her friends recalled seeing Lacey for a few minutes after Garnett died to exchange some belongings, and said Lacey was very concerned about what the papers were saying and what people in the school community were saying, but didn't mention her son.
Well, that's nice.
Once it became clear to the physicians that Garnett would not recover, the medical staff alerted the child abuse hotline, prompting the police and the district's attorney office to get involved. When police arrived, they interviewed the hospital staff and Spears. The hospital found that the sodium content in Garnett's body corresponded to 69 small packets of salt.
Oh my God.
That's a lethal quantity.
Yeah.
When the police asked how there could be that much salt in Garnett's body, Spears answered by saying this questioning should be asked to the doctors and not to her, a mother who was already suffering so much. When they asked her when was the last time she used the feeding tube to feed Garnett, they suspected that she lied and gave a false response.
Of course she did.
This began to make them suspect her of poisoning her son with salt, possibly through his feeding tube. They told Spears she could not leave the pediatric ward until they completed their investigation. The police then interviewed Lacey's family members and scrutinized video surveillance from both hospitals to determine the timeline of events. They found that while at Nyack in New York, Garnett was mostly restricted to a room with a video monitor secured to his small body. At the Children's Hospital in Westchester, video footage showed multiple times when Lacey took Garnett into the private bathroom, which was not videoed. The police believed that it was during one of these trips that she had poisoned Garnett for the last time. As a result, they confiscated her phone, computer, and the feeding bag she had on her. Which, you're in a hospital, why do you need a feeding bag of your own?
Yeah, that doesn't scream suspicious at all.
During the months of investigation, the police found that Lacey had searched ways to commit suicide, such as overdosing on sleeping pills and self-injecting insulin.
Oh my gosh.
Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence occurred when, according to a neighbor who lived near Lacey, Lacey had called her from her child's deathbed and asked her to go to her home and get rid of a bag.
Oh my gosh.
The neighbor did as she was asked and took the bag from Lacey's Chestnut Ridge apartment. However, instead of discarding it, she held on to it and then later turned it over to authorities.
Ugh, good.
According to toxologist Christopher Cording, who tested the bag's contents, it contained 5.5 teaspoons or 22 servings of sodium.
Oh my God. That's so much.
That's the same amount of sodium as in 69 McDonald's salt packets, 8 salt bagels, or 20 hot dogs.
1 second. So that's a lethal dose of sodium, but 20 hot dogs? People eat way more than that in hot dog eating contests.
He's 5, though.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I forgot he was 5 for a second.
Police continued their investigation, believing Spears had poisoned her son on at least 3 occasions. Once before his admission to Nyack, another time during his stay at Nyack, and again after she was confronted by a doctor at the Children's Hospital in Westchester. They confirmed this theory after video evidence showed Lacey at the hospital with a feeding tube and what is believed to be salt water while taking Garnett into the bathroom for the final time. In June 2014, Lacey was arrested on murder and manslaughter charges in what the police described as the final act of a deranged mother who medically tortured her child for years and documented the results of the torture on Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, and her personal blog.
She had them all covered.
Yes. Spears has denied doing anything to harm her son, and her lawyer, David Schatz, declined to comment on the boy's death. At the trial, which took place in February of 2015, Spears showed little emotion while prosecutors described how she made up young Garnett's sickness, causing him to be unable to eat food or gain weight, have seizures, and develop a swollen brain, ultimately leading to his death. During closing arguments, Westchester Assistant District Attorney Patricia Murphy encouraged jurors to watch footage from the video EEG that was set up at Nyack Hospital to monitor Garnett for seizure activity to see whether Spears showed Garnett any affection. She said, quote, "See if ever once in whatever segment of that video you want to look at, if she has ever hugged her son. See if she has ever kissed her son. Lacey Spears is not an innocent mother grieving the death of her son. Lacey Spears is a calculating child killer who researched, planned, and executed the intentional poisoning of her son. She is no longer the mother of Garnett Spears because she murdered him," end quote.
Mic drop.
She also says, quote, "It has always been about Lacey. This case has never been about Garnett. It's all about Lacey, Mother of the Year." On March 2nd, 2015, the jury found Lacey guilty of second-degree murder, and she was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. The judge did acknowledge that Lacey suffered from Munchausen's by proxy, and therefore did not sentence her to the maximum of 25 years in prison before parole eligibility. Lacey Spears will be 46 years old when she is eligible for parole.
I hope she does not get paroled at all.
No, she does not deserve to be paroled. That's for damn sure, especially after she killed her own child.
I don't know how these mothers could even possibly think about doing these kinds of things to their babies.
Munchausen's, that's how. Come on, Shayna. We've been talking about this the whole time.
Like, I can't even imagine causing any kid, let alone my own, any amount of pain like that.
Okay. I'll give you that one. That's fair. That's fair. So we have a listener birthday this week. Shayna's bonus daughter, Cadence, is turning the big 1-3 on Monday, which is the day this episode is releasing. Happy birthday to Cadence.
Happy birthday, Cadence. Also, please don't come at me with, she's only 13. Both her moms are obsessed with true crime and both agree that it is important for young girls to know the dangers of what is out there.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this wild ride this week. If you have a birthday coming up, let us know so we can give you that shout out. Also, if you have a personal story you would like to share with us, or maybe even a case suggestion, you can always email us at thickthighsmurdervibes@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at Thick Thighs and Murder Vibes Community. Come back next week when we talk about what happens when bullying goes too far.
Bye!